like sound system working okay? Okay. All right. Looks like we got a good crowd this morning. So some of you had to go around that accident down the bottom of the hill? Yeah. Well, I hope the Lord protects folks, especially if any of them were Christians in that thing. Well, May the 4th, some people joke about it about talking about Star Wars Day, but we'll see. Notice we got little new microphones up here on both sides. When I first looked at it, I thought, are those little spray nozzles? So if you fall asleep, okay. But we'll see. So supposedly this will be the first time, and Bill will be back there tinkering around, trying to see how they work and all like that. So you all cooperate really nicely with him, please. All right, today we're going to be getting into 2 Samuel 16, and we're going to be talking about the first 14 verses in 2 Samuel. As a note, we're going to look back a little bit and back up just a little bit of who are the players in this passage and what it's talking about. Particularly if you haven't been in previous lessons and you don't know who the players are, that one of the persons there, well, is Saul's descendants, Jonathan, Mephibosheth. Saul was the king over Israel. His son, Jonathan, which was David's good friend, and he promised Jonathan that he was going to be gracious to his descendants because of that promise. Along comes Mephibosheth, would be the next person, who would normally have been the rightful heir to the throne after Saul. So then you also have another relative in this passage, relative Shimei, and we'll be talking about. So we have different people that are related to Saul and his ascent on the throne there. And then we also have Ziba mentioned there. He was a servant to Mephibosheth. So they're all that one group of people. Got a reference there about 2 Samuel 9. I'm just going to hold your place there if you wish. But I'm going to read a little bit in 2 Samuel 9. One day David asked, is anyone in Saul's family still alive? Anyone whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? He summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. So previously to Mephibosheth, he was Saul's servant. Are you Ziba? Asked the king. And, yes, sir, I am, Ziba replied. The king then asked him, is there anyone still alive from Saul's family? So I want to show God's kindness to them. And Ziba replied, yes, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive. He's crippled in both feet. Where is he? The king asked. In Lodabar, Ziba told him, and at the home of Michar, the son of Amiel. So David sent for him, and brought him from Michar's. And his name was Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. When he came to David, he bowed low to the ground in deep respect. David said, greetings, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, I am your servant. And David said, don't be afraid. And he showed kindness to Mephibosheth and restored lands. And Ziba was his servant. Basically, what happened is Mephibosheth went on to talk about he was lame in his feet. He was dropped during this battle, and so he was not able to get around. So Ziba was going to be in charge of all the lands that Saul had that would have gone to Ziba, and so as a servant he had a whole bunch of children and other people. So they farmed everything. They did as if Ziba was basically in charge of everything for Mephibosheth. And so that's the background of the people involved in this chapter here. And of course, we don't want to forget David, of course. He's the other main character that we're going to be focusing in on. But if you can see, there's basically two sides of a coin there. One that was of the previous administration of Saul and their group, and David. The first part, verses 1 and 2 talks about Ziba meeting David with supplies. And we'll look in chapter 16. I'm reading from NLT. There's some your other versions may be read a little differently, but we'll see. When David had gone a little beyond the summit of the Mount of Olives, Ziba met the servant of Mephibosheth. He was waiting there for him. He had 2 donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruit, and wineskins full of wine. And what are these for? The king asked him. So here's Ziba meets David. Of course, he had this, they were right on the road, meeting with him. He was waiting for him there. He had all these supplies. It's interesting, he was actually waiting for David there. I think with some of the other versions just says he met him there. But it was interesting. Obviously, Ziba had to do some preparation of gathering this stuff. And obviously, being part of the in charge of all these crops and everything, he had ready access to lots of supplies, the donkeys, the food, and everything like that. And he saw a situation here that David was fleeing for his life. Absalom, his son, was wanting to kill him. He revolted against David, and David was fleeing from Jerusalem, basically running for his life, trying to get away from his son at that time. And Ziba came with these supplies at a very crucial moment for David. Obviously, David left basically with the clothes on his back. And Ziba came, and it was a great need supply there. That's the good thing. But we also see later on when the king says, "What are these for?" Ziba replied, "These donkeys are for king's people to ride on, bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, wine for those who become exhausted in the wilderness." That is relief. That's good news. That's something that David needed. But then Ziba goes on. He speaks against Mephibosheth. Well, so what's this going on here? What's going on with Mephibosheth? I mean, you're his servant, and I see you here with all these supplies. Well, what's the deal with Mephibosheth? Well, his grandson, the king asked him where he stayed in Jerusalem. He said, "Today I will get back the kingdom of my grandfather Saul." You mean this guy that I have provided for, saved his life, got all these, got your servants and took care of and everything, like you can eat at my table and all that. I mean, this was he some kind of scoundrel stabbing me in the back at the time when I need it most? This was a very heartbreaking time for David to say that, because he had a good relationship with Jonathan, and here comes then comes Mephibosheth that he showed this kindness to, and look how he's rewarding me at this time. And he says, "Oh, today I'll get back the kingdom of my grandfather Saul." Yeah, I'm the rightful heir. David's out of here. I'm going to get this. And he's figuring that Jonathan, the plot, the idea is Jonathan and David are going to be fighting each other. They're going to basically, wipe each other out. And if they wipe each other out, I'm the last man standing. Okay, and that's what Ziba communicated to David, and there's a problem with that. I think we'll find it. Just jump ahead in chapter 19, in verse 24. This is after everything's done. David comes back, and David's kindness to Mephibosheth. It's a hard name to say. Now Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, came down from Jerusalem to meet the king, and he had not cared for his feet, trimmed his beard, or washed his clothes since the day the king left for Jerusalem. "Why didn't you come with me, Mephibosheth?" the king asked him. Mephibosheth replied, "My lord, the king, my servant Ziba, deceived me. I told him, 'Saddle my donkey so I can go with the king.' For as you know, I'm crippled, and Ziba has slandered me by saying, I refuse to come. So Ziba manufactured this situation for his own rightful, gains and all like that. Think of you. You see this over and over again in life when somebody is really kind and gets you a nice, wonderful gift, and there's a hook in it. Okay, I'll give you an extra $1,000 on your trade-in on this overly inflated car that I want to sell you. Okay, when you see kindness and a gift, is it coming from the heart, or is there some ulterior motive going on here? And I think we can see that what was happening here is that he was trying to make it look like Mephibosheth was stabbing you in the back. And what was his motive? Well, we can see that in that case, I'll give you everything Mephibosheth owns. I bow before you, Ziba replied. May I always be pleasing to you, mother. He had ulterior intent that says, hey, I'm no longer going to be the servant. I'm going to own it all. Get rid of Mephibosheth. Hey, this is, and I'll get to have it all. He had ulterior motives there. Looked like he was given, but he was really taking. That's what scammers do all the time. Okay? And here's a thing. And I'd have to say, thinking about it, I could see that David, based upon the only information he had, and it looked like, this guy's been, good in the past. I don't see any reason why he would deceive me. And so based upon that, his knee-jerk reaction, well, that you get to have it all. And I'd have to say that sometimes the way we get scammed is sometimes knee-jerk reaction. You got to act on it right now. And if you ever get one of those little calls or emails or whatever, boy, you got to act on it now, or you're going to lose out, or you're going to get penalized. Look out! Look out! And here's the Bible shows a good story of how that can take place. That what Ziba tried to pull on David. And always a caution there when you hear something that's too good to be true. Careful. And at the same time, if somebody's spreading negative news about something, be careful too. Don't just take the word of one person and act on it. So that's something. Does anybody have a comment on that, or even something you want to share?
Banks always tell me, it looks too good to be true, Maria.
Oh boy. So it's you see that happening in life. There's situations like that, and this is a good, life example for us right here. Well, the next part we go is the Shimei. Shimei comes along and he's cursing David, and where he is cursing this deposed king. Shimei, again, was a relative of Saul. So he already had kind of a biased attitude about David versus Saul. Blood runs thicker than water, as the old saying is, that you want to stand up for a relative, and you gobble up all the excuses and reasons and whatnot to stand up for a relative versus somebody who's down the street. Yes?
In it as well, because as a relative of the king, he had at least prestige and maybe some power, which he would have lost when David became king.
Yeah, lost power, lost prestige, yes. And so therefore, when David became king, hey, now you're sidelined. And by the way, that if you look at the history of when a king comes to power, what does he do to the relatives and friends and neighbors? He wipes them out.
He was blessed, yeah.
So other kings, when they come to power, they're so greedy of power, if you may say, they wipe out everybody that's related to the last power.
And also they never would let a handicapped person become ruler.
Yeah. So Mephibosheth wouldn't have become ruler anyways, because being handicapped, what a leader. So we see that that situation take place. So let's see. This is a man from the household of Saul. As king came to Bahurim, a man came out of the village, cursing them. It was Shimei, the son of Gera, the same clan as Saul's family. He threw stones at the king's officers, and all the mighty warriors who surrounded him. Get out of here, you murderer, you scoundrel, he shouted at David. So he was very, very disrespectful in the least. And here he's seen a situation where, all right, David is off balance now. I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to, unload my feelings about what's taking place here. When you're down, let's kick him while he's down. And that's basically what Shimei was doing there. He was taking advantage of that situation. He was very cowardly attacked. And one is very apt to reply and use hard words and take advantage of a person who is in a downward position. If you don't, you don't do those kind of things, but this is what Shimei was involved in doing at the time. And so I guess you've heard the phrase, let's not make a bad thing go to waste, let's take advantage of it. Okay, this is what Shimei, it's another current example, okay? Let's not make this tragedy, this terrible thing go to waste. Let's take advantage of it. What can we do here? Let's kick those that are down, and let's see what we can get out of it for ourselves. And that's what we're seeing here. And we have to be careful that we don't get trapped in those same type of things. Any comments or questions? Okay. So the next thing is we see, how do we treat someone we don't like when they're going through a hard time? Any comment? Okay.
Heap their head with coals.
That coworker, that neighbor, that person who cheated you, that relative who took all the inheritance that was supposed to share it with you, whatever. How do we treat that person? Any comments?
God says, love thy neighbor.
That's right.
Okay.
Mark said, you love your enemies and you do good, and then it heaps hot coals on flame. So, but it's just the way that we can distinguish ourselves from the world by being followers of Jesus.
Too often our attitude is, yeah, he got what's coming to him. Yeah. And you secretly, behind the scenes, just say, yeah, that's right. And I think there's some places in Proverbs, doesn't it talk about that rejoicing over somebody else's falls? God may very well, hey, okay, I'm going to back off on this. And you see, so there's things that you got to be careful to treat people right, even if they treat you wrong. It's hard to do. It's hard to do, and it's harder even if it's a relative, a brother or a sister or a relative that was a scoundrel in the family that just really cheated everybody or whatever it be, or a brother or whatever. It just, or even a parent, it's just like you hold that grudge and you're going to take it to the grave. The problem is it'll put you in the grave quicker too, It's just that thing. Any other comments? But what do we say or do with people that go through a hard time? Other comments? Okay. Pray for them.
If we are praying for somebody, it's amazing how those angry and vengeful feelings disappear.
Yeah.
Because we are more likely to see it through God's eyes.
Right.
If we pray for them, that's the only way we can love them. God says to love your enemies, do good to those that despitefully use you, and pray for them.
Yes.
But if you don't pray for them, you're in the flesh, there's no way you can love them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good comment there. Yes.
I just think keeping in mind the grace that God's shown us,
Yes.
and then loving them in the sense that would actually lead them to.
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview with Senator James Lankford and Oklahoma, and he was like, when you really, really get mad, there's something you can do that will always tickle you to anger. And I was listening, and it was like, you serve him, you serve him. And I was like, yeah, I know, like, if I've had a falling out with somebody, I'm like, you know, really irritating me, but, you know, can I make you something to eat? Can I help you?
I've seen through the years of things like, for instance, landlord-tenant type things. When you have a tenant, let's say, that they don't pay the rent, they tear up the place and they leave, you know, and I've seen that happen different times. But you know, of those people that if I ever hear anything news about them later on in life, they are still in the dumps. They're going through all sorts of trial or legal problems or whatnot, and sometimes the best attitude is just, I just take it, fix what needs to be done, don't hold it against them, and keep moving on. You know, and you basically take what came to you and don't get bitter over it. And bitterness just tears you up, you know. And I find. Okay, so let me see. The Lord is paying you back for all your bloodshed in Saul's clan. You stole the throne. And now the Lord's given it to your son Absalom. At last you'll taste some of your own medicine. You're a murderer. Well, if David really was a murderer, I don't think he'd put up with this guy carrying on like this. Okay? So was he really a bloodthirsty man? How did Saul get killed? It was in battle. Okay? If Saul had the right attitude towards David, instead of David basically hiding in the wilderness, and David were with Saul in that battle, do you think that he would have gotten run over by the enemy? Probably not. You see? So it was Saul's own doings and sin and wickedness that he had done that brought death to him and his sons. It had nothing to do with Daniel. But here's a relative. I'm going to hold that grudge. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, from his standpoint, he's right. David was not a bloodthirsty man towards Saul, but there was some truth to what he said, because David had killed Uriah. So that may have colored why David reacts like he does, because there was some truth to what Shimei was saying.
Yes, there is some truth to that. And I'm going to get to that. Well, you're taking my points. Okay. All right. So, as I asked, did David really steal the throne? No. Who gave David the throne? God did. Okay? Does Absalom have the right to take from David what God gave David? No. And see, David was the anointed one that God put there. And when God puts something in place, you honor it. Okay? So God put in your life a spouse that you've promised to. Okay? So God allowed that to take place. Even if you say, well, I'm married under adverse situations or what, hey, it's before God. Let's stick with that situation and make the best of it that God put there. And if it falls apart, you know, don't let it be you. Let it be the devil that takes it apart, but not you. So I'm getting off on a rabbit trail. But so this is where was Shimei right? You know, we said he was wrong on the bloodthirsty and the terrible take the throne, but how was he right? In what way was Shimei right?
Chuck said.
Like Chuck said, oh, well, that answer said, well, actually, if you read there what he's, it says, I haven't gotten to that verse yet. Here. Well, okay. Basically, that God allowed the Shimei to do this, and God permitted Shimei to do that because David did wrong in some earlier chapters there, and this is one of the consequences that happened because of his wrongdoing in these earlier chapters. Yes.
Another aspect too is even though, David being a man after God's own heart can't really be accused of being bloodthirsty in the sense that he means it. I mean, David was still a man of blood as God called him to. No, you can't build the temple because you're a man of blood. From the very beginning, after killing Goliath, they're singing Saul's slain the thousands, but David is 10,000.
Okay.
Saul's dowry that he asked David to bring for him for his daughter was very bloody. And, just all of the conquest he had made. There's an element of truth that's distorted. Is he bloodthirsty? No, but all of that could be taken and twisted to say, hey, you're a bloodthirsty man. That's all you want is death.
Yes.
Destruction.
See, in that verse it says, the Lord brought this upon David, is what Shimei said. Yes, the Lord brought this upon David. So he was right on that aspect. The Lord did. But it was not for the reasons that Shimei said. I've noticed that through the years with a coworker or a neighbor or something like that will want to criticize you. Hey, you do this or that. They may be wrong in most of the things they're saying, but sometimes there's a kernel of truth in what, your yard is a mess and therefore it caused this and this. Well, guess what? Your yard's a mess, so what are you going to do about it? That sometimes that criticism, as harsh as it is, if we take a little bit of time and listen to how we are criticized and set aside the feelings and stuff and look at the facts, and a lot of times there's a little kernel of truth that, hey, maybe I am a little too harsh, or maybe this, or maybe that, and pay attention to that part. Maybe God's trying to get our attention on that one part, okay? Even though the rest of it is garbage, okay? So that's how he was right. So the next thing we see is, what is David's response to this cursing, to the rock throwing, to the dirt being thrown at him and all like that as he's going, what is his response? We see that he says, and what was the response to Zeruiah? Why should this dead dog curse my king? Abishai, son of Zeruiah, demanded, let me go over and cut off his head. Now this is the reaction of the world. I'm going to go over and cut off his head. That's not the way we treat. Now this guy, he was one of the mighty men, the soldiers. I mean, he wouldn't flinch at the idea of David said, go ahead. He was, and here's this guy cursing and throwing stones and whatnot, and here's this mighty soldier right here with his weapon and all like that. He could very well put an end to this cursing, but so he was saying, but no, said the king. Who asked your opinion, son of Zeruiah? If the Lord has told him to curse me, who are you to stop him?
It reminds me of what Jesus told Peter when he said, you should never die. No. And he said, get thee behind me, Satan. He knew that there was a plan. He saw, and it's David, it seems to me, showing a picture of Jesus' response.
Picture of Jesus.
To somebody saying, no, you should be honored and respected. And he's like, no, I'm going to have to suffer.
Yeah.
So he rebuked him for his desire to honor him.
Yes.
It might be a little bit unwise to be too harsh with Abishai, because the fact of the matter is we live in a time when it's very common to slander public figures and disrespect them. And if we were to go back to most parts of the world 200 years ago, insulting the king was a treasonous offense. There's something to be said for God's economy in which you respect people in authority, and you make sure that the society respects people in authority. Whether you like them or not is kind of not the issue. They are to be respected, which is exactly what Peter basically told the early Christians. So Abishai, in a sense, was preserving David's dignity, or seeking to, and that might not necessarily be a bad thing, even though it would be very uncommon in this day and age.
Okay. Comment back there first.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Another thing that this reminds me of, and we may have seen this earlier with David, where he reflects some of the teachings of Jesus that came later, of course, that weren't really in the Bible that David had. And it made me think of in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus says, but I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. As far as I know, that's not in the Old Testament anywhere. But,
Right.
you know, David is resisting not evil. You know, Zeruiah says, let me resist this guy, let me take his head off, let me fix the problem for you. And David says, no, don't do that. So he's, in effect, David is saying, we're not going to resist him, we're going to let him have his words and just go on.
Have his words, turn the cheek. Yes. So let him curse is what that said. Yes.
It's amazing how David considered the Lord is speaking to him instead of this guy. You know, that
Lord
he's
may-
using this guy to speak to him.
Yes. Sorry.
That's
Go ahead.
okay. So we see the consistency of David's character shining through, because when it was David versus Saul, David refused the opportunities he had to disrespect Saul and said he was the Lord's anointed. He put his trust in what God was going to do, and he's doing the same here, even though now he's the king and the disrespect is being shown him.
This is showing David, like you said, shining his, why was he a man after God's own heart? This is an example, even though he did wrong, but now he's showing he's doing right and showing the example of being a man after God's own heart. So we continue on. Then David said to Abishai and to all his servants, my own son is trying to kill me. Doesn't this relative of Saul, bad spelling, have even more reason to do so? Leave him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to do it. Now, the Lord didn't tell him to, but allowed it to take place. You know, this is taking place. I'm going to learn from this. You know, my son is trying to kill me. I think in perspective here, my son trying to kill me, that is much more important than this guy yapping at the side of the road throwing rocks and stones. What is the most important thing here that I'm really concerned about? And it's not this guy. So I'm trying to put things into perspective here. What is the important thing to take care of? The things that are really the important thing, or the little side issues? So many times we get caught up in side issues, and we allow the side issues to dominate and take over. And then next thing you know, we wind up reacting to the side issues, and we make the small things the big things, and then we just make a big mess out of everything. I'm sure you've seen that numbers of times. So David knew his real problem was Absalom, not Shimei, and he did not lose his perspective. He knew that God's hand was on the future as well as the present. It says that God may, let me see if it says, perhaps the Lord will see that I'm being wronged and will bless me because of these curses today. As we mentioned earlier in the Psalms, it says, don't you go rejoicing over somebody who falls that you can't stand. Because God may say, okay, well, I'm going to pull off that, hey, here's David going through a hard time, and I'm not going to seek vengeance. I'm not going to seek going out and trying to exalt myself and, hey, I am the king. You don't talk to me that way. I'm, and me, and focus on himself. No, he focused on who? The Lord. Okay? The Lord's going to take care of this problem. If somebody's cheating me, if somebody's doing wrong to me, if somebody said something harsh to me, if whether they're dead or alive, I'm not going to go seek revenge on that person, because God's going to take care of that, and God's going to take care of me. Yeah, revenge of mine. Yes.
5, 10, 11, and 12 about the blessings in the Beatitudes for those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Yeah.
It seems that David has that perspective.
He has that perspective, and it's really okay. So we see David and his men continued down the road, and Shimei kept pace with them on the nearby hillside, cursing and throwing stones and dirt at David. It just went on and on and on. And you could imagine that they were kind of getting weary of this. And I'm going to stay the course. The problem didn't go away immediately. Now, I know right well this Shimei, if you know anything about bending over and picking up stones and rocks and throwing and all, I don't think you're going to do that for very long before you're worn out. Okay? David knew this was a passing thing. It was going to move along, and just let him alone. Let him alone. David could take take the guy's head off. He could have dealt with it in a moment, but no, let's just be patient about it. Let's let this problem work out on its own, and I am not going to seek revenge. I think we've seen different places so far where people taking revenge. The only bad comes out of taking revenge. Only bad can come from that, and he could do it easily, and it'd be an open and shut case. But the thing is, a bitter word may not necessarily end that argument. It may linger on and on. Sometimes the best thing to do is to step back. And when you do that, when you do what's right, what follows is that you become refreshed. And that's what the last verse, there's two different, now the king and all the people who were with him became weary. So they refreshed themselves there. The New King NLT talks about it, and they grew weary along the way, and they rested when they reached the Jordan. The Latin Vulgate has that part there about coming to the Jordan. The Hebrew text does not mention that, so that's why the two differences there. So when you do what's right, you're refreshed. You know, if you seek revenge and do what's wrong, is that guilt, the nagging, you've continued the problem on and on. Now let me ask you, can we see Jesus in David in these last passages? Now, you already mentioned some. Can we see Jesus in these and how David responded?
After Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, the angels came to minister and refresh him.
Refreshment when Jesus was tempted. Anybody else? Okay. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid our faces from him and said, "Get out of my face." Don't you see that David was being rejected there? A man of sorrow. Oh, hey, I think I've heard that. What about Jesus before Pilate and all, and there are all these accusations. What did Jesus do? He was silent. He took it. So we see David basically showing an example as Christ, the son of David, that showing Christ-like examples of what to do. And how was he rewarded? He was refreshed of spirit, of soul. Here they are by the water, and with all this dirt and mud, guess what? Let's get this off of us. Okay? Let's get all cleaned up. Let's get refreshed. And let's move on. And God provided a refreshment at a time when it could have been disastrous. The thing is, let's see, in the book of Tale of Three Kings, Gene Edwards put these words into the mouth of David. The throne is not mine, not to have, not to take, not to protect, not to keep. The throne is the Lord's. It was that kind of heart that kept David on track through this difficult time and enabled him to be refreshed. So let's take to heart what this has to say today and apply it to our lives. You all have a wonderful day.